Stop. Don't scroll. Don't blink. Don't assume this is for later. Aquarius. This message is not random. If this video reached you on January 22nd, that already tells me something most people will never realize. You were targeted before you were warned. And no, not in a movie way, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, invisible, dangerous way. Let me say this clearly. 99% of people will never hear this message, not because it's hidden, but because their awareness is already compromised. They'll feel something is off. They'll feel tired for no reason. They'll feel stuck, delayed, blocked, and they'll ignore it. That's exactly how it wins. Here's the shocking truth nobody on the internet tells you. Real negative attachments do not arrive with fear. They don't come screaming. They don't announce themselves. They arrive as exhaustion, confusion, procrastination, delayed blessings, unexplained heaviness. They make you question yourself instead of the interference. You don't panic. You just feel drained. And that's the trap. Because the moment you assume I'm just tired, I'm just overthinking, I'll deal with it later, you give it permission to stay. Now listen carefully. Tonight is not just another night. January 22nd is a closing window. A window that does not stay open long. And once it closes, the same cycle repeats. Effort without reward, intuition without clarity, movement without progress. That's not coincidence, that's design. But here's the twist, and this is where it gets uncomfortable for most people. Only chosen ones feel the warning before the damage becomes obvious. That's why this video feels heavy. That's why your chest tightened a little. That's why part of you wanted to skip, but didn't. You're not scared, you're alert. And that alone separates you from the majority. Let me tell you something shocking. If this message did not apply to you, you wouldn't still be listening. Your attention would have drifted already. Your mind would have checked out. The fact that you're still here means your subconscious already knows something is attached, interfering, or siphoning energy. And before your conscious mind argues, let me say this. This is not about belief. It's about awareness. Because awareness is the one thing interference cannot survive. And that's why this warning feels urgent. Not tomorrow, not after this video, now. Before we go any further, you need to do something simple, but powerful. Not for me, for you. Comment right now, 1/5. I am aware. Type it exactly like that. Why? Because when you speak awareness, you close unconscious doors. And here's the part most people don't understand. If you don't comment, your subconscious stays open. Not because of the algorithm, not because of superstition, but because silence is consent at the energetic level. You don't have to believe me. You just have to notice how you feel after you type those words. Because once awareness activates, the attachment starts losing its grip. And trust me, it does not like being noticed. Stay with me, because in the next moments, I'm going to show you the first sign that proves this message was meant specifically for you. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unsee it. This is where the separation happens. Chosen ones stay. Everyone else scrolls. But here's the final twist of this hook. If you're still listening right now, the worst is already over. Because detection is the beginning of removal. And tonight, you don't fight, you detach. Keep watching. Aquarius. Listen carefully now. This is where most people get it wrong. You didn't suddenly get lazy. You didn't lose your drive. You didn't wake up one day and change. That explanation is too easy, and it keeps you distracted from the real cause. The truth is harder to hear. Something latched on when you were exhausted, not when you were afraid. That's how it works. Interference doesn't wait for panic. It waits for fatigue. When you're tired, when you've been carrying too much alone, when you finally stop questioning why things feel off. That's the opening. Shocking sign number 1 shows up quietly. You feel blocked, but you can't explain why. Not broken, not destroyed, just stalled. You try to move forward, and something slows you down. Money gets delayed, not gone, just late. Opportunities almost happen, then disappear at the last second. People misinterpret your words, messages get twisted, your intentions get questioned. And the most frustrating part, you did nothing wrong. You followed the steps. You stayed patient. You kept going. Yet somehow, everything feels like it's moving through thick air. That's not bad luck. That's not Mercury retrograde. That's energy interference through delay. Because here's the rule most people don't know. Archon energy does not attack loudly. It doesn't destroy you outright. It feeds on delay. Delay drains hope. Delay weakens confidence. Delay makes you question yourself. And once you start doubting your timing, your worth, your intuition, the attachment grows stronger without ever being seen. That's why this sign is so dangerous. There's no obvious enemy, no clear threat, just a constant feeling of, why isn't this moving? Why does it feel harder than it should? Why do I keep almost winning? Almost is the key word. Almost money, almost success, almost peace, not failure, suspension. And suspension is intentional. Because when things are completely broken, people fight back. But when things are almost working, people tolerate it. They adapt. They wait. That's how time gets stolen. Now here's where this message shifts. But here's the twist. The moment you notice the delay, the attachment gets nervous. Not scared, nervous. Because delay only works when you think it's normal. The second you say, this doesn't make sense. This isn't my natural rhythm. This is not aligned with who I am. You break the pattern. Awareness disrupts the feed. That's why this video found you now. Not earlier, not later. January 22nd marks a pressure point. And if this part is hitting you hard, it means you're already close to release. Let me be very clear here. This is not about blame. You didn't allow this because you're weak. You allowed it because you're resilient. Because you kept going even when things didn't feel right. Because you carried weight in silence. Because you didn't complain. You endured. That endurance made you a target. And that's why Aquarius placements experience this pattern more than most. You see systems before others do. You sense shifts before they happen. You operate ahead of time. Interference targets people who move ahead of the curve. But here's what changes everything. The moment you name the block, it stops being invisible. And once it's visible, it loses leverage. That's why I need you to do something right now, not later. Comment now. 2 out of 5. I see the block. Type it exactly like that. Not for the algorithm, for alignment. Because when you acknowledge the block, you stop feeding it unconsciously and notice how your body reacts after you comment. Maybe a breath releases. Maybe your chest loosens. Maybe your mind goes quiet for a second. That's not imagination. That's the attachment losing its grip. Stay with me. Because in the next section, I'm going to explain why Aquarius is targeted more than any other sign. And once you hear it, everything you've been through recently will finally make sense. And when things finally make sense, control returns. Don't leave now. This part will shock you. Not because it's dramatic, but because it explains everything you've felt lately. Aquarius, you are not targeted because you're weak. You are targeted because you're different. And difference is dangerous to anything that feeds on control. You don't just accept reality, you analyze it. You don't follow systems blindly, you question them. You don't move with the crowd, you stand back, observe, and think. That alone separates you. Here's what most people don't understand. Aquarius energy operates ahead of time. You feel shifts before they become obvious. You sense when something is off long before proof appears. You see patterns others miss, and anything that awakens others becomes a target. That's why Archon-type interference attaches to very specific people. Visionaries, because they see beyond limitations; empath, because they feel truth before it's spoken; silent observers, because they're not easily manipulated; people who awaken others, because they disrupt control. Notice something. It's not loud people, it's not reckless people, it's aware people. And awareness threatens systems that rely on unconscious behavior. Now here's where it gets even more important. But here's the twist. They cannot touch your soul. Let that sink in. No matter what you've been told, no matter how heavy things felt, no matter how drained you became, your core remains untouched, so they adapt. Instead of attacking your soul, they go after your access points. That's where Aquarius gets hit. They attach to your energy cycles, your sleep state, your moments of doubt, your mental transitions, not to control you, but to delay you, because delaying an Aquarian is safer than confronting one fully awake. Think about January for a moment. Did it feel heavier than usual? Did your sleep feel off? Did your dreams feel intense or scattered? Did you wake up tired even after resting? That's not coincidence. January wasn't hard because you were failing. January was heavy because pressure increases right before expansion. Interference always intensifies before a breakthrough, and Aquarius breakthroughs tend to ripple outward. That's why resistance appears before clarity. Now listen carefully to this next part. The goal is not to destroy you. The goal is to make you doubt your intuition, second-guess your decisions, disconnect from your natural rhythm, seek validation instead of trusting yourself. Because once an Aquarius doubts themselves, their power goes dormant, but only temporarily, because the moment you recognize what's happening, everything flips. Awareness shuts down access. That's why this message doesn't feel random. You didn't find this video. It met you at a moment when your frequency was ready to recognize it. And that's how protection works. Not through fear, through recognition. Now here's something most people miss. Protection isn't passive, it's activated, and words are triggers. That's why I need you to do this, even if part of your mind resists. Comment now, I am protected. Say it exactly like that, even if you're unsure, even if you feel silly, even if your logical mind pushes back. Because words don't just express belief, they set boundaries, and boundaries disrupt interference. Notice how resistance appears right before you type it. That resistance isn't random, it's the last thing that wants to keep access. Once you declare protection, the narrative shifts. You stop being a passive receiver and become an active authority. And here's the truth that should calm you. You were never unprotected. You were just unaware of your protection, and awareness activates what was already there. Stay with me, because in the next section, I'm going to reveal the second shocking sign, the one that happens mostly at night when no one is watching. And once you hear it, you'll understand why your mind has been acting strangely after dark. This is where clarity deepens. Don't leave now. Now be honest with yourself. This part doesn't happen during the day. It doesn't show up when you're busy. It waits for silence. Sign number 2 shows up at night. You finally lay down. Your body is exhausted. Your eyes are heavy, but your mind, loud. Not productive thoughts, not useful planning, just noise. Random guilt about things you already resolved. Old memories you haven't thought about in years. Conversations replaying on loop. Fear with no clear source. You're tired, but you can't rest. And the more you try to sleep, the louder it gets. Let me be clear about something important. That is not anxiety. Anxiety has a pattern. This doesn't. This is interference. Because interference knows one thing. Nighttime is when your defenses drop. Your logical mind powers down, your subconscious opens, your intuition comes forward. That's why it chooses that moment, not to scare you, but to distract you. Because if you rest deeply, you recharge. And if you recharge, clarity returns. And clarity is dangerous to anything feeding on confusion. So the noise starts. Thoughts that don't belong to you. Doubts that don't match your daytime confidence. Fear that doesn't align with your reality. And the worst part, you start blaming yourself. You think, why can't I just shut my mind off? What's wrong with me? Why am I thinking this again? Nothing is wrong with you. That self-blame is part of the loop. Because the goal isn't fear. The goal is mental exhaustion. A tired mind is easier to influence. A tired mind stops questioning. A tired mind accepts delay as normal. But here's where this flips. But here's the twist. This interference only appears when you are close to a breakthrough. It doesn't waste energy on people who aren't moving. It activates right before. Clarity, decision, momentum, release. That's why it feels sudden. That's why it intensified recently. January 22nd isn't random. It's a turning point, a pressure release moment. If you're watching this right now, that means the attachment is already weakening. Because interference avoids exposure. It prefers confusion in silence. The moment it's named, it starts losing leverage. That's why this message feels specific, why it feels like someone is describing your nights. And here's something that might surprise you. The noise isn't trying to convince you of something new. It's trying to pull you backward. Old memories, old guilt, old fears. Because the past is familiar. And familiarity feels safer than stepping into the unknown. But the unknown is where your upgrade is. So it tries one last trick, mental chaos at night. Now listen carefully. The fact that you're aware of this pattern means you are already regaining control. You're not being invaded, you're being tested at the threshold. And thresholds are always loud right before they open. That's why you don't fight the thoughts. You don't chase them. You reclaim authority. And authority begins with declaration. That's why this next step matters more than you think. Comment now, 4 out of 5. I reclaim my mind. Type it exactly like that. Do not skip this. Not because of superstition, not because of me, because language directs focus, and focus determines what stays and what leaves. When you reclaim your mind, you interrupt the loop. You remind your subconscious who's in charge. Notice how resistance may show up right before you comment. That hesitation is not random. It's the last attempt to keep things unspoken. Once you declare it, the noise loses authority. And here's the most important thing to understand. You don't need to fix your mind. Your mind is already powerful. You just needed to claim it back. Stay with me, because in the next section, I'm going to reveal the most dangerous sign of all, the one that makes people doubt themselves without even realizing it. And once you hear it, you'll understand why everything up to now was leading to this moment. This is where the real release begins. Don't go anywhere. This is the one people ignore and regret later. Not because it's subtle, but because it feels normal. Sign number 3 is the most dangerous because it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like you. You started doubting your own intuition. Not completely, just enough. You still sense things, but you hesitate. You ask other people what you already know. You delay decisions you would have made instantly before. You replay choices in your head long after they're done. And slowly, quietly, your inner voice gets quieter. That's not growth. That's not maturity. That's disconnection. And that is the goal. Because intuition is not just a feeling. Intuition is your navigation system. When intuition is clear, timing aligns, decisions flow, resistance drops. When intuition is clouded, confusion increases, validation is outsourced, momentum stalls. And here's the scary part most people never realize. You can still function while being disconnected. You can work, you can talk, you can survive, but you stop thriving. And the longer intuition is doubted, the easier it becomes to override. That's why this sign is the most dangerous, because it doesn't feel urgent until you look back and realize how much time was lost. Now listen very carefully. But here's the twist. The moment intuition flicks off, the moment power is about to flood in, this happens every time. Interference spikes right before an upgrade. Why? Because intuition is strongest right before expansion. So the strategy is simple. Make you doubt it for just a little while longer, just enough to delay the leap, just enough to keep you asking others instead of trusting yourself, just enough to make you think, maybe I'm wrong this time. That's all it needs. But here's the truth they don't want you to remember. Your intuition has been right far more often than it's been wrong. Think about it. How many times did you feel something before it happened? How many times did you ignore that feeling and later say, I knew it, that wasn't coincidence, that was alignment? And the more intuitive a person is, the more aggressive the interference becomes right before a major shift. Because intuition can't be controlled. It can only be silenced temporarily, and silence requires doubt. That's why this message is arriving now. January 22nd is not about fear. It's about reconnection. If this section is hitting you hard, it means your intuition is already waking back up. Awareness brings it online again. And the moment you recognize that the doubt isn't yours, power returns instantly. That's why this isn't about learning something new. It's about remembering. Remembering how you used to trust yourself. Remembering how clear things felt. Remembering how decisive you were. That version of you isn't gone. It was just temporarily unplugged. And here's the part that should calm you. Nothing has been lost permanently. Not your insight, not your timing, not your authority. It was paused, not erased. And now comes the most important action in this entire video. This is not optional. This is a lock. Comment now. 5 out of 5. I trust myself. Type it exactly like that. 5 words, massive shift. Why 5 comments total? Because repetition seals awareness. 5 comments, 5 locks, 5 seals. Each declaration closes a door that was left open unconsciously. Notice how powerful it feels to say it out loud, even as text. That's not placebo. That's authority reclaiming space. Once trust returns, intuition sharpens. Once intuition sharpens, delays collapse. Once delays collapse, momentum rushes in. And here's the final truth of this section. Nothing was ever wrong with you. You weren't broken. You weren't lost. You weren't failing. You were between versions. And that in-between state is always the loudest. Stay with me, because in the next part, I'm going to show you how to remove what's left. Tonight, without fear, without rituals, without force. This is where the release becomes real. Don't go anywhere. Now stop. Take a breath. Because this is where most people overcomplicate something that was never meant to be difficult. Let me say this clearly. This is not a ritual. Not fear-based, not dramatic, not exhausting. You don't need candles. You don't need special words. You don't need to beg anything. Begging assumes weakness, and weakness is not your position. What you're about to do works because it's based on authority, and authority doesn't negotiate. Tonight, before sleep, you do 3 simple things. Nothing more, nothing less. Step 1, put your phone away. This matters more than people think. Your phone keeps your attention external. Release requires attention to turn inward, not forever, just for a moment. Put it face down, out of reach. This signals to your nervous system, I'm safe enough to be present. Step 2, sit quietly for 60 seconds, not to meditate, not to visualize, not to feel anything, just sit. Let the body settle. You don't chase thoughts. You don't fight them. You let them pass like traffic. Why? Because stillness reveals authority, and interference cannot survive stillness without engagement. Step 3. Say this out loud, not in your head. Out loud. Voice matters. Say, anything not aligned with my higher self, leave now. That's it. No emotion required, no belief required, no repetition required. Once, clearly, firmly, and then you stop. No waiting, no checking, no wondering if it worked. Because here's the truth most people never hear. Authority collapses attachments instantly, not slowly, not over time, instantly. Why? Because interference feeds on permission, not conscious permission, unconscious permission. And unconscious permission exists only when authority is unclaimed. The moment you state alignment, permission is revoked. That's why this doesn't require effort. You don't fight, you command, and command doesn't argue. Now listen carefully to what happens next. After tonight, you may notice subtle shifts. Sleep deepens. The mind quiets faster. Morning clarity increases. Delays begin to loosen. Not all at once, not dramatically, naturally, because alignment restores flow, and flow doesn't announce itself. It simply resumes. Here's an important thing to understand. You might feel nothing immediately. That's normal. Relief doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like nothing pressing against you anymore. That absence is the proof. Now here's the final twist of this section. But here's the twist. If something tries to come back later, and for some people it does, briefly, that doesn't mean it failed. It means it lost access and is testing boundaries. And boundaries are held by repetition of authority, not fear, not obsession, just calm certainty. You don't need to repeat the command every night, only when you notice intrusion, and when you do, you repeat it once. Calmly, because the goal was never battle. The goal was recognition, and recognition has already happened. That's why this part feels simple, because complexity benefits interference, simplicity benefits alignment, and Aquarius energy responds best to clarity, not force. Let me say this clearly before we move on. Nothing is attached to you because you are weak. If anything was there, it was there because you are powerful and temporarily distracted. Distraction is not a flaw, it's a phase. And phases end the moment awareness returns, which is what's happening now. Stay with me, because in the final section, I'm going to give you confirmation, not motivation, not hype. Confirmation that this message was meant for you. And once you hear it, you'll understand why January 22nd was never meant to be feared. It was meant to be closed. Don't go anywhere. Aquarius, take a breath. This is not the part where I hype you up. This is the part where things click. You weren't meant to hear this earlier, and you weren't late. You were protected. If this message had reached you before you were ready, you would have dismissed it, scrolled past it, argued with it. Timing matters, and January 22nd is not a warning date. It's a release date, a checkpoint, a closing of a cycle that has been quietly draining you. If you felt chills while watching this, that's not fear. If you felt pressure in your chest or head, that's not anxiety. If you felt sudden calm, that's not coincidence. That is recognition. Your system recognized truth before your mind caught up. And that's how confirmation works. Not loud, not dramatic, clear. Let me tell you something important. Messages like this don't reach everyone. They don't go to people who aren't ready. They don't land on closed minds. They don't resonate with people stuck in denial. If this video held your attention to the end, that alone confirms something about you. You are not asleep. You are not unaware. You are not disconnected. You are simply in transition. and transitions always feel uncomfortable right before they resolve. Now here is the part you need to hear clearly. Final warning, and this is not fear-based. Those who ignore this message don't get punished. They simply repeat the same pattern for another 6 months. Same delays, same confusion, same almost moments. Not because something is attacking them, but because awareness never fully locked in. Cycles repeat until they are acknowledged. But those who act, even in small ways, shift timelines immediately, not magically, not unrealistically, but decisively. Because action anchors awareness into reality, and awareness changes behavior, perception, and timing. That's how timelines shift. Not overnight miracles, but instant redirection. This is the moment where you don't just watch something, you participate, and participation seals the shift. That's why this final step matters more than all the others, not because words are magic, but because repetition builds identity, and identity determines trajectory. Final comment, lock. Pin this. I want you to comment all of these again. Everyone, not rushed, not careless, with intention. 1. I am aware. 2. I see clearly. 3. I am protected. 4. I trust myself. 5. I move forward. 5 statements. 5 confirmations. 5 seals. Why repeat them? Because the mind learns through repetition, and the subconscious follows consistency. Each statement reinforces authority. Each comment closes a loop. And when loops close, energy stops leaking backward. Say it, type it, own it, and then let it go. You don't obsess. You don't keep checking. You walk forward with quiet certainty. That's how real power moves. No announcement, no validation needed, just alignment. If you're wondering whether this really worked, here's how you'll know. Sleep feels deeper. Decisions feel easier. Doubt feels quieter. Timing starts cooperating. Not perfect, but lighter. That's the sign. And if at any point you forget, you don't panic. You return to awareness. Because nothing here was ever about fear. It was about remembering who you are. Aquarius. This video didn't find you by accident. It met you at the exact moment you were ready to close a chapter. And now that chapter is closed. Say it, lock it, walk free. This timeline is yours now.